very good evening to one and all present, and welcome to a brand new episode of Express with Ease Students Speak on View TV by Vijay Bhumi. This is a series which is very close to our heart, where every week we are joined by a dynamic student panel where we discuss contemporary issues and we hear from them that what do they feel, what does the youth feel about each of these issues that are, burning issues on the global and the national stage. Today, we have gathered here to discuss a very, very hotly debated issue in the past few weeks, which is journalism in democracy. Some of the central themes of what we're going to be discussing today is, firstly, in these times, we're hearing about numerous journalists who have been detained, harassed, abused. So are we living in a time where the freedom of speech and expression that is guaranteed to us by the Constitution of India, is that currently under threat in our country? Are there really unreasonable restrictions that are currently, in play in our country that are making it difficult for journalists to carry out their duty of reporting news to us? Is the news that we are consuming today, is it truly neutral? Is it truly unbiased? And is there fair reporting that is being happening? Talking about the TRP scandals, are journalists, the ethics and the code of conduct that must be followed by journalists, is that actually being followed? Is there a need for an authority to intervene and actually impose a journalistic code of conduct? These are going to be the central questions that we are going to be addressing in this conversation today that I'm going to be having with my three student panelists. With this, I'd like to welcome all my audience members who are joining me live. As the people who have joined us earlier in this conversation would know, this is a conversation where we would like to include as many people as possible. I'm sure many of you would have already discovered the chat box feature. Please make sure that you're sending us a lot of your questions, your comments on the discussion that we are having today. And we will make sure that we will make it a part of our conversation. If there is a question you would like to ask each of our student panelists, we will make sure that, we include that in our conversation today. So without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the students who are joining me today. Today, we are joined by Mr. Arjun Rajan. Arjun Rajan is a junior at the Manchester International School. He's a graphic designer, an ardent gamer, and a tech enthusiast with a love for reading. He's passionate about the development of the digital and gaming industry of India. Thank you so much, Arjun, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you in this conversation with us.
Thank you, Pam.
We are also joined by Mr. Tejas Kulkarni. Tejas Kulkarni is an avid debater and a defense and military aviation enthusiast. He's a seasoned guitarist. He is currently head boy at his school, which is the Jayashree Periwal High School, Jaipur. He's been a part of many social outreach programs for underprivileged people in and around Jaipur. Thanks, Tejas, for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Miss Anjali Raj Kopa. She is passionate about activism, and trust me, I was very excited when I read about her profile that she's very passionate about gender causes like gender equality, LGBTQ plus rights, sexism. And as a house captain of her school last year, she worked on programs to further gender equality. She's also an avid debater herself. Glad to have you, Anjali, on this panel. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely. So let's get started with this conversation. And first, I'd like to invite my student panelists to actually share their opening remarks on the question is that why is the media, or rather why, to put it in a different way, why is journalistic media so important to a democracy? I mean, that's the first question that we must talk about before we get further into this conversation to tie a link between the topic. So let's hear from you first, Tejas. Why do you think, the media is so important to democracy? We all know it's the fourth pillar of democracy, but what are your thoughts on it?
Very true. So When we talk of journalistic media and its importance for a functioning democracy in today's times, we must look at the rudimentary functions that journalistic media performs. One is constructive criticism. The whole concept revolves around the fact that media is a system which checks the government at every step of the way and magnifies its shortcomings. Second, spreading news and awareness. There are a lot of things which we, as the general public, might not even come to know, uh, even come to know about, such as scandals, corruption, etc., which without the media being present would be suppressed by the powerful sitting in the offices because it's obviously not beneficial to them. So, third one is analyzing. When we watch debates and discussions on television or read an article in a newspaper, we are basically spectating an analysis which helps us to build our own point of view pertaining to various aspects of a nation and obviously international matters as well. All these functions play an extremely crucial role for the smooth and most importantly, fruitful functioning of a democracy.
Thank you so much, Tejas, for your views. Totally agree with you that yeah, media is very important for the functioning of our democracy. What about you, Arjun? What do you think? Do you agree with Tejas's views? Would you like to add something from your end? How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I definitely think that I agree with Tej's views of dividing the media's thing into three different things, and I think I would like to add that we should also take a closer look at the democratic system that we are following, which is representative democracy, and basically we get to vote for a specific set of representatives who then make decisions and create policies, laws, rights, things that are going to affect us. And in this case, there are two distinct parties: the average voter and the representative. And in order to assess whom to vote for, or whether you have voted for the right person, in order to know whether you have voted for the right government, you need to know almost every single thing about the representative and their decisions, how it has affected people across the country. And for an average voter, it would be near impossible to go around across the country and learn everyone's different perspective, different opinions, and how they have been affected by these, new changes in law, etc. So I feel like journalism is something that bridges and is like a thread that binds together the voter and the representative. And I don't think that without proper journalism, that the democracy can function the way it was meant to be functioning.
Absolutely. I think that's another very important facet of journalistic media that you've highlighted, the link to the fact that, how it's linked to representative democracy and how it gives voters an idea about how each of the, representatives are doing and gives them a better idea of how their voting should be. That's fantastic. What about you, Anjali? What do you think about this?
I definitely think Arjun made several good points, and I would like to add my own points here. So, in a democracy, right, as Abraham Lincoln said, it's a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. So, we the people are the ones who matter in a democracy. And as in any logical group, the majority certainly has a bit more power than the minority, right? So, the problem with this is the majority of the people who are in the majority and the people who are in the right, they might not always be the same people. A lot of the time, being in the right and being in the majority can be mutually exclusive. And also, let's define power as the people who are in the majority, who have money or who have the influence to cause change. So they might not always be right. And I think it's clear that this can pose several problems, right? So in certain areas, like more ephemeral areas, for example, fashion journalism or movie journalism, pandering to the people who have the power or who have the influence, it's not going to cause any significant damage. So in those areas, it's fine. However, when you're talking about something crucial like politics or rights, that can just be extremely dangerous if you pander purely to the majority. Hence, I think something that is very important that journalists can do is turn the limelight onto people who might be in the minority, but they still have the right view. Take a country where the majority of people are Caucasians and there is a very small minority of people of color. So the Caucasians will probably enjoy a great slew of rights and they will have the absolute freedom, right? Whereas the people of color might be discriminated against, might not receive the same healthcare, the same free education that the Caucasians get. So in that case, they are in the minority. However, they have the right view that they also deserve equal rights as compared to everybody else. So in a situation like that, only with journalistic media can we, take the right idea and spread it to everybody else. So I think for a democracy to function properly and for everybody to have the right idea, journalistic media is extremely important.
That's also a very fantastic point that you've made, which is about how media becomes a voice for the minority. And especially in a country that's complex like ours, where we have religioustic and social minorities and majorities that coexist in the same country, it is very important that every section of society needs to find their voice. And that's what, essentially, at least what one would envisage that is one of the functions that media must necessarily perform. Now, this brings me to my next question, right? I mean, in times like today, where, I think this probably has been one of the darkest times for Indian media, because there are people who are constantly doubting the objectivity of what is being portrayed in the media, right? Like in what we hear in the news. And this is not only true for, the visual news that we see, that with the, through television, but also this is true for, the print news that we see. There is constantly questions that are being raised about objectivity. So, let's address this fundamental question of how objective do you guys think? Because I'm sure you guys must be discussing it with your peers as well, right? That, what you guys feel about what is being shown in the news, what is being shown in print news. How objective do you guys think the Indian media is today? So let's start with Arjun. Arjun, what is your view on it? What do your peers think about it?
Thinking about it, I do not think that the Indian media is very objective. But at the same time, I don't think that they are also not objective either. Because I feel like whenever it is going to be of benefit to them, they choose to become objective. They're selectively objective, in fact. So the problem is you can't really blame them entirely for it, because I think in order to understand the situation, we must look from the point of view of the people who potentially exploit the system, which are the corrupt politicians who use their political power. So if I was a representative, I would have the intent of wanting to reduce poverty, increase education, etc., etc. But my ultimate motive would be to win the elections. Because without winning the elections, I cannot enact on whatever my intent is. So whether I have good intent or bad intent, my ultimate motive would be to win the elections. And in order to do so, I would have to influence the public and convince them that I am the best candidate for them. So what is the best way of doing so? If you think about what is the best way of doing so, it's obviously using journalistic media. So this leads me to a question where I can use my political money, influence, everything in order to sort of catapult fake and paid journalism, which is biased towards my own political standing. So in such a situation, what happens is that false news, irregular information, false information would be spread and reinforced, which leads to the people picking and keeping in power the wrong representative. In this example, me, because I abuse my power in order to bias the journalists and then in turn bias the news. So without an objective media, I feel like democracy would not exactly, would go against what democracy initially stood for. Because at that point, the public could be manipulated to an extreme level. In that regard, I don't think there's much of a difference between a monarchy and a democracy without objective media, because in the monarchy, the citizens outright do not have the option to vote, while in a democracy without an objective media, what happens is that the citizens could be manipulated and influenced to the point where the decision that they end up making, is it really their own decision? So I feel an objective media is extremely important, and right now we do not entirely have that.
Absolutely, I think that's a fair point that you've made. Anjali, what do you think about it? How objective do you think Indian news and media is nowadays?
I think Arjun made a beautiful point when he said that the media is selectively objective, as in when it favors them and when it sheds a positive light for their particular affiliations, they can be objective. But when they need to, they certainly tweak the truth a little bit, right? So I think what happens is a lot of the time after we elect a particular politician to power, they tend to make a lot of promises, right? Like Arjun said, their intent is to get the people onto their side and to get the people to trust them and get them elected. So while they tend to make a lot of promises in the run up to the election, after they get elected, a lot of the time they seem to somehow conveniently forget everything that they said. So, for example, the US elections are just over, right? So, President-elect Biden, one of the things that he mentioned was that he was ready to try to erase or forgive quite a bit of the student debt that a lot of American students have collected. So, I think that certainly did get him a bit of kudos with the whole, college crowd and young people in America, because a recent study showed that around 40% of average Americans have some kind of college debt accumulated in some way. So now that he has been elected as the president. So people are immediately holding him accountable to the statements that he made. As in, there are now lots of organizations are, petitioning him saying, hey, you said you will forgive some of our student debt. So are you going to do that? So they're holding him accountable. So in the same way, after we elect some person to power, we need to know what they are doing with the power that we gave them. And they need to know that they are held accountable by us, because we are the ones who put them in a position of power. And again, we are the ones with the power to bring them back down, because we are the people who vote, right? So if the media doesn't show us what are the bad things that the people in power are doing, we will not know what they are doing with the power that we entrusted in them. We will not know, are they doing what they promised us? So I think for that, the media needs to be 100% objective, right? They cannot simply hide certain things just because it is detrimental to their political party. They need to give us the 100% truth at all points of time. So I think it is absolutely crucial for a democracy. And like Arjun compared a democracy where the media is not objective to a monarchy, right? I completely agree. I think if we keep operating with a media that is not objective, it will become a false democracy and it will no longer deserve the term democracy to be used.
I think that's a fantastic point that is made, which is about, a democracy turning into a monarchy if you don't have an objective media which is in play. What do you think, Tejas? What is your opinion on this? Do you think our media and news channels are objective? And what do you think is the current standard of objectivity that they're following at this point of time? Like, how do you feel about it? Do you think you can trust them?
So, as Arjun and Anjali both have very rightly pointed out, that the whole matter and the whole subject of the media being objective is actually subjective. It is selective for all the media houses. They practice the objectivity at their own convenience. So I would say that objective media is the only form of journalism which should be present, and I will tell you why. As stated before, the function of journalistic media is to report or to spread facts and awareness. It does not include the formation of opinions. The public should be given the sole responsibility of forming their own opinions. In today's time, we see a lot of news channels and media houses who propagate only a single-sided line of thought of any case, which should not be the scenario. The function of media is to analyze a case at large and not interpret it from a single point of view. And in today's time, we see a lot of news channels, media houses, newspapers, which at their own convenience see only a single side of the coin. They see only one side of the coin of any case, which, in my opinion, is detrimental to the people's point of view. And the people's point of view is actually what is essential for a democracy. The function of media is, as I stated, the function of media is to analyze a case at large and not interpret it. And that is what is happening currently, and I think that is very wrong. Therefore, an objective media, in my opinion, is indispensable for a democracy, as the people's point of view, which they form with the information at their disposal, at their own disposal, is what runs a democracy. So I think that objective media is actually essential to a democracy, and if news channels and media houses start presenting only one side of the coin, then a faulty point of view will be developed, and that is not at all beneficial.
Thank you, Tejas. So now Tejas has actually highlighted a very important facet, and if I may say so, this is one of the biggest, I think, the issues that are plaguing journalism today in India. What is happening is that, one is noticing, especially with popular media news channels or media, news outlets, you are able to notice political affiliations from the kind of narrative that one is hearing in the way the news or a certain incident is reporting, right? A lot of us can, one makes out that, okay, what, we think that this channel seems to be affiliated to a particular party because of the way they are blowing out of proportion a particular news. Now, this is a very worrying trend in a democratic country like ours, right? So what I would like to know from each of you is actually to be able to understand that, do you think at this point of time, the way things are being reported in our print channel, in our print media, in our news media, do you actually think that there is transparent reporting that is happening? B, do you also think that somewhere, we like it or not, politics and news and media is actually inextricably getting linked in our country, and that is somewhere reflecting in the kind of reporting that is coming out of through these outlets? I'd like to hear your views on this. Anjali, if we may start with you, what do you think about it?
I absolutely think that media in India is not transparent at all. Because what do we define as transparent here, right? They should be 100% honest. As in me, as the consumer, I should be absolutely clear about what I am getting when I look at a particular news channel. However, I don't think that is happening at all. So obviously, it's fine to have a political affiliation or to be part of a particular religion, because especially in a country as rich with lots of religions as we are, obviously there are going to be some kind of affiliations. However, what you do with that affiliation, that's what counts, right? Just because you are part of a particular religion, that does not give you the freedom to condemn people who do not agree with the particular views that you are a part of, right? So when a media house is affiliated to a particular organization, that's fine. However, what are they doing with that affiliation? How are they using the influence that they have to, how are they using the influence that they have upon their viewers? So I think news is, by definition, it is just simply a transcription of the events that happen every day. However, media nowadays has evolved in a negative manner to the point where they are not giving us the news, and instead they are kind of tweaking the news to a point where we are not receiving what is happening, we are receiving what they want us to receive. You know what I mean? So I do not agree that they are transparent at all. So yes, I think that the political affiliations that they have are certainly damaging. And also corruption is something that has affected a lot of the parts of our nation, right? And I don't think that the media field is any exception to being affected by corruption. I think media has almost become a business where lots of the principles take a hit when something becomes a business, right? Because sometimes you have to think about what profits you and what you believe in, and a lot of the times that can clash. So there are a lot of political parties and big corporations that plunge money into media houses so that when they eventually get into a bit of trouble, or when a bit of their shady business is exposed, the media houses can be sure to report it in a favorable light and to make sure that their company or their organization is seen in the best light as possible. So because media houses do take offers like this and they are not showing us the 100% truth, I do not think that media is transparent, and I think that they need to work on that.
I think that's brilliantly put. What do you think, Tejas? What do you think about political affiliations with news channels? This is something that one notices, these worrying trends. What do you think about it? A, should it be allowed? B, if it's allowed, then how does one regulate it? What is your take on this?
So, when we are talking about the political affiliations that media houses have, so there's no problem in a media house or a news channel being affiliated with another organization or a political party. But the problem begins when that particular media house starts endorsing the ideologies of that organization or political party. Because the purpose of media is to propagate news, is to propagate facts. But once they start endorsing the ideas and the mandate of the organization or the political party, then that news gets polluted, so to say. So when we're talking about the transparency of Indian media, I would say that is subjective. If it benefits a particular channel, then all the facts and figures are very well explained and analyzed, but on the contrary, the case might be very different. And this is quite evident in Indian media, as each and every media house might present a story or a case in different ways and versions according to their own convenience. But when we are talking about the full transmission of information or the legitimacy of that information, I would say that the Indian media is quite transparent. Because what happens is that if Indian media is actually, or any news channel is actually broadcasting real news or the news which is real, so that actually benefits the news channel or the media house because it adds to the reputation of that media. So, in my opinion, the legitimacy and the whole transmission of information is not faulty, but the choice of what information to broadcast and not to broadcast, that is faulty.
That's a fair point that you've made there, Tejas. Arjun, would you agree with it? If you may unmute yourself, you're on mute.
Yeah, I actually do agree with Tejas that the actual transmission of information is not at fault here, but the problem is the way they present this news. They tend to, like he said, they tend to pay more. They tend to give more importance, pay more attention to specific facts which might benefit them, while sort of how there's disclaimers and ads at the bottom, something like that. They tend to sort of give more importance to things that may benefit them while not exactly explaining things that might be against their political ideology. Also, while talking about the transparency of Indian media, I think something that really affects this is the fact that almost every regional political party has their own news channel, has their own newspaper, and obviously when political parties run their own news channels, newspapers, they are going to be it's almost impossible that they will not be biased. It's almost certain that they will be biased towards their own party's political opinion. And I think that's something that contributes a lot to how transparency is being lost, because when a political party owns the entire media house, they're really not likely to say something that might be against themselves. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Arjun. Now, if we would have had a media person who would have been part of this conversation, one of the things that they would have said that, it's so unrealistic for people to assume that, we need to assume this holy position and, we have to not think about, at the end of the day, these are for-profit organizations that we're talking about, right? For them, it's a game of TRPs. For them, it's really about, minting money. There is intense competition when we talk about, news and media, like print media or, like visual channels. So, they would just say that, what is this burden or obligation that we carry that, we have to ensure that only, we'd act like, for example, like a Doordarshan, and all we are going to do is we're going to act like a transmitter of news. I mean, if we act as a transmitter of news, then clearly, it may not be something that, the consumer may want, because this is very, one can notice this from, when you see the TRP of channels. Like, there is a reason why the TRP of a channel like a Republic or a Times now would be higher than, a channel like a Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha TV or a, Doordarshan. The reason is, people are craving that masala, so to say. So how do we address this problem? Do you think the government needs to step in? You should have some laws where you need to have an ethical code of conduct. But how should we address this problem? Because see, there are two sides of the same coin, right? So one is that their function as a news and media house, which is to just transmit and report events as they happen and not add their own tadka to it, which is comes by virtue of their affiliation. And the second is the fact that at the end of the day, these are also for profit organizations, right, where they are also constantly intensely competing against one another. So how do you solve this debate? Who should intervene in this matter? How should we solve this dilemma? So let's start with you, Tejas, on this.
So, when we are talking about that, what we are discussing currently, that the media houses should only transmit news, nothing else. So, the addition of tadka, as you mentioned in the news that they broadcast, the problem is not there. The problem is that they go too far when they are only chasing one story. We have witnessed this. We have witnessed this over the years that whenever we are watching a news channel, the it might this is quite rampant that a news channel will follow only one story in one day. Whereas if you watch Doordarshan, on the contrary, they will cover many topics. So I would say that political affiliations are one factor to this. But what happens is that these news channels uh, they think that one story is more entertaining for the audience. So they only follow that story. Actually, that should not be the case. They can follow many stories, they can follow multiple stories in one day, in one week, and still add that tarka. That creativity has to be there, which makes the news attractive to the audience. But that does not mean that you make the choice of your stories or the leads that you want to have restricted. Once you have your choice restricted, all the stories, all the news, all the facts that the public needs to be aware of are not presented. So that creativity can always be there, but there should be a broader choice of stories and a broader approach to those stories, in my opinion.
Right. So Anjali, Tejas thinks that there needs to be a broader choice of stories and broader approach to stories. What do you think? Do we need an intervention that is required? Like, you need, the conglomerate of journalists or somebody to, actually put a heavy hand down and say that, guys, you know what, we understand your profit, your for-profit organizations, but these are like certain regulations or directions that you need to follow. Like, what do you feel? Is there a need to regulate them, or do we leave them unregulated? How do we approach this problem?
Okay, so while I understand that people crave drama, right? Like everybody loves some good reality TV, right? I don't think news, especially about important events that are happening around us and that might affect us personally, I don't think that is where we should be getting the drama from. So sensationalism is a big part of the media nowadays, but I don't think that is true journalism, right? So I think if I understand that they are for-profit organizations, pretty much all jobs are for-profit, right? But your motivations there also matter. If you are focused purely on the profit that you're making and you have no sense of ethics or morals, you're not going to get anywhere that is good, right? So I think if they truly want to purely increase the say viewer ratings, what they should do is to make the news more accessible to the everyday person, right? So it should be more accessible to the layman, less jargon, more accessible language per se. And also, I definitely think that they cannot simply be allowed to go on as it is right now. So what I think we should do is to hold them accountable. For example, on famous social media platforms such as Twitter, there is a feature where fact checking happens, right? So I believe there was some hilarity that ensued when Donald Trump was tweeting things and immediately it was followed by a disclaimer that the tweet might not hold legitimate information about the election or about the pandemic. So I think there needs to be a level of fact checking because we a lot of the time we just accept that what we see on the news is 100% true, but that is often not the case. So I think there should be some kind of governing body that makes sure that what is being said on the news is proper news and not just rumors or anything. I think there needs to be some kind of implementation of, say, fines, for example. Because news channels have a lot of influence and power in this country. They have a huge viewership and they can certainly affect a lot of people. So if all that they do is issue propaganda that might be harmful to a certain group of people, that certainly needs to be stopped, right? So I believe there could be fines, and if there are repeated breaches of the regulations that have been put into place regarding the type of news that you can broadcast, I think there should be some kind of implementation where they might be temporarily suspended from broadcasting to the same public. But yes, they certainly need to be controlled on some level, I believe.
So we have Anjali, who's very strongly advocating for a code of conduct, with necessary penalties and fines in case of any violations. What do you feel, Arjun? Do you think similarly? How do you think we should regulate the problem of sensationalism in Indian media?
I think definitely I agree with Anjali that they do need to be regulated. I think we would need to establish a separate legal body, which is separate from the other branches of the government, somewhat like how the judiciary is separate from the branch of the government. A separate legal body which governs over all the media houses and closely observes and monitors their publication releases. So by doing so, I think I do agree with you that people crave some sort of extra entertainment, some sort of masala in their news channels and stuff. But I think, like Anjali said, there is reality television for that. There are channels for that where we can go and entertain yourself in matters where it's really important for the country, for the well-being of people, such as politics, rights. I think we must be really clear that there should not be any sensationalism included, no biases. It is really important that it's objective as possible, more as subjective as possible. So by creating a legal body independent from the other branch of the government, I think it would be more freer from political biases. And also there should definitely be financial consequences for putting out fake or biased news, because right now one of the main reasons why new media houses tend to put out biased news, fake news, and create sensationalism is for their profit motive. And in order to counter this profit motive mind, I think creating a financial consequences, hefty fine on whenever they put out fake news or put out biased news would really reduce the amount of sensationalism and fake news that's being put out by media houses.
Thank you so much.
I would like to add something over here.
Sure. Go ahead, Tejas.
So, when we are talking about the legal body supervising over the media houses, so I think that is not practically viable, because the whole concept of TRP and as you rightly mentioned, that the news channels and the media houses are a profitable organization. So they want profits. If you don't have that sensationalism, then how do you then how is the TRP well distributed? Because all the news channels are offering the same thing. So where does that profitable nature of the whole business, you can say, it is also a business. So where does that profitable nature of the business go? So one is that. Second one is that when we are talking about biased news, fake news, it is quite evident that the mainstream media and the main news channels and the media houses that we have, they don't propagate fake news. All the news that they are broadcasting is actually legitimate. But when we are talking about biased news, if we have a legal body which actually enforces laws on them regarding biased news, then I would say that it is a waste of time. Because if a news channel is broadcasting biased news and someone allegates that you are broadcasting biased news, then they will obviously deny that allegation. And they have their set of justification, and journalists are really good at justifying themselves. So if we have legal cases against them, then those legal cases will only be pending in courts and will keep going on. And I think that is unnecessary legal pressure on the judiciary.
Can I add something here in response to him?
Yeah. Go ahead, Anjali. Go ahead.
Right. So, according to your first point, Tejas, you said their sensationalism is what puts them, what puts them apart from all the other channels that say the same old thing. But here, isn't it more important that we receive the right message and that, people all over the world, people all over the country who are impressionable, it is important that they receive the right news, right? For example, say a very radical religious group might use their position in a media house to propagate the idea that somebody of a particular other religion has committed some kind of offense against their own religion, which will then probably result in some kind of riots or turf wars. We've seen a lot of that in India. You know how it is. So I agree that journalism, as everything else, is a business, but there are so many businesses in so many other groups, right? Take say supermarkets. There are so many supermarkets which all sell the same products, but what puts one as more profitable than the other? It's how smartly they utilize the resources, they utilize the say advertising. It's how smart they are with the resources that they have, but they don't need to resort to illegal means to do it, or let's not say illegal, let's say unethical means to do it. So here, I don't think it is a good thing to say just because they need to survive as a business, they should be allowed to say whatever they want. I agree that freedom of speech is absolutely vital, especially in a country like ours. But if you use your freedom as speech as a justification to say, be racist or sexist or homophobic, that's not good. That's not ethical, right? That's not doing anybody any good. So I think we should hold them accountable, even if they are even if they are, organizations that are purely for profit. So yes, and I don't think that, say, taking them to court would be a waste of time. Let's say the first week of implementing some kind of regulations and somebody breaks those regulations. Say there would be, let's just say 10 court cases would be filed, right? So all of those companies are going to have some kind of lawyers to argue on their behalf. We have to put trust in our Supreme Court and in our judicial system that they will take the right decision there, right? So once there are 10 lawsuits, and then the next time they break the laws, there'll be 7 more lawsuits, because these many companies have already gone and argued their case in court. I don't think they will want to go rehash that over again, right? So while it might be hard to implement at first, as every new rule or law is in our country, I think eventually we have to look at the long-term benefits, and eventually we will certainly benefit from imposing some kind of regulation. Because you know how when somebody says something bad, people say this is what the real world is, people don't change. That style of thinking is very harmful too. That is the reason why the real world still has a lot of negative sides. If more people think we can bring about a positive change, and if we try, we can cause something positive to happen, then we would not need to prepare people saying, oh, the real world's like this, you'll have to deal with it. So I think we should try to regulate it to some extent at least.
Actually, I would like to add one more small thing. For something that's regarded as the fourth pillar of democracy, something that holds up democracy essentially, I don't think it should be converted into a business model. It currently is a business model, but I don't think we as the people would not benefit from it being a business. It should be an essential service of the country to provide us with unbiased and objective news. So while I do agree with you that right now, yes, they do need to survive in the market in a competitive market, they do need to survive. I think eventually we need to convert this model into a more service-minded industry, something they do as a form of social service, or it's not a social service actually. It's an essential good almost. It should not be regarded. I don't think journalism should be regarded as a business.
I
That's also
completely
yeah. Go on, Tejas. Go on.
Yeah, so as Anjali pointed out, then sensationalism is not good for the journalism sector, for the media sector. That is not entirely true, because sensationalism or creativity in presenting news is not at all, you can say, not beneficial or is detrimental to the quality of the news that is being broadcasted. So having sensationalism, having creativity in presenting the news is uh, the freedom of the news channels. It is their decision. And there is nothing wrong in that, because sensationalizing news is not decreasing the quality of the news that the consumers are getting. So I would say that sensationalism can be there, but obviously, like if you are sensationalizing news and defaming an organization or a person, that is really bad. But presenting news in a creative way, that is not bad. So Anjali, you gave the example of supermarkets and what sets them apart. They have the same products, and they have the same target audience. They have the same target consumers. What sets them apart? What sets them apart is the quality of the products that they are selling, and how creatively they are advertising their products. So if you are comparing journalism with the supermarket business, the grocery business, then we also have to look at the fact that media houses also need to advertise. They also need to put a creative touch in what they are doing. So sensationalism cannot improve the quality of the news that we are getting currently. However, it might, you can say, remove the logical fallacies that we are witnessing, because if I regard the whole concept that a news channel will only follow one story in one day, then they involve in debates, they involve in discussions which are only stretched, and they are coming to only one single conclusion, but they are consuming a lot of time. So what that leads us to is, as consumers, is logical fallacies, that a certain topic has to be debated, but in order to avoid that topic, the debate gets diverted into a different direction. That is obviously bad, but that is not the result of sensationalism. So, in conclusion, sensationalism in journalistic media, in the news that we are getting, is not detrimental to the quality, or it is removing sensationalism is not going to improve this sector as well.
Tejas, I'd say maybe you need to slightly rethink what exactly your definition of sensationalism is. Because what you said was sensationalism is the media houses presenting the news in a creative manner. That to me sounds a bit more like a euphemism that is disguised to kind of, uh, say skirt around the topic and not approach it directly. Because even if you simply search for the proper definition of sensationalism, it will be like the presentation of news in a way that is designed to provoke public interest or excitement. However, there will be a part at the end that says at the cost of accuracy. So sensationalism at its core involves the idea that accuracy isn't the most important thing, and instead the kind of reaction that you get from your viewers is what sets it apart. So you said what sets a supermarket apart is the quality of its goods, right? I think if I receive some kind of news that is designed to make me react but isn't designed to give me a full idea of what is happening, I would not regard that as the highest quality. Let's take, for example, some kind of fast food. So we look at it, it's fancy, it tastes amazing, we want to eat it immediately, right? But would you say that that is the highest quality thing? Just because it looks good, just because it smells good, doesn't mean what it contains is entirely healthy or good for us in any way. And I think it's the same thing. So I don't agree with your definition of sensationalism or your definition of what kind of news is quality news.
So, if I may add here, I think one thing that all of us agree to the fact, and I think as a lawyer, probably I can also pitch in, is the fact that sensationalism becomes problematic when it sort of goes in contravention to your legal standards, right? And that is what we need to ensure, right? Because like you pointed out, Anjali, that is the definition of sensationalism, that you're presenting news in such a way to provoke or incite some negative emotions in people that you're trying to cash in on, right? That is the thing, and that's what we saw, like with the recent scenario of the way the Sushant Singh Rajput case went on. This is exactly classic case of sensationalism of Indian, by Indian media. So I think the buck needs to stop there, where you say that, okay, fine, you are allowed to present the news in any way that you'd want to. But like with any right in the Constitution, if you have the freedom of speech and expression, there are also some reasonable restrictions that are applicable to it. And I think that is the thin line that we need to maintain. It is okay for you to absolutely, it is very important for the press to have the freedom of speech and expression, because like we all agree, this is the fourth pillar of democracy. This becomes the voice for the minority, it becomes the voice for various different sections of our society that exist in our country. But having said that, we need to ensure that the media houses that engage in this particular business have to ensure that they are within the conformities of the restrictions that are imposed by the Constitution. And I think that is where, when they toe that line, is when I think legal action and sanction is necessary, because our country's fabric is very volatile. Now, if this goes unregulated completely, I mean, we all have seen that the kind of things that have happened in the past, right? You have riots that have been sparked because of this. So many movements have been sparked because of this. So definitely there is this mantle of responsibility because of the kind of function that they perform, that they have to be mindful of. A very good point again made by Arjun. What I felt was about him saying that maybe it is also the time for us to relook the fact that if you're privatizing this function completely, then obviously profit is going to take center stage. So maybe how can we work with it in a way where we increase the public private partnership, and government start supporting media houses, they don't become exclusive private functions. That is also something worth exploring. Again, it has its nuances attached to it. So that is something that so we've had a pretty heavy discussion on this question. Now, what I'd like to know from you guys, because we always also take pride in the fact that this is a platform where we have, like, in our audience, you will have fellow students who are joining you, you'll have fellow you'll have educators, school educators who are joining you, you have parents who are joining you. I want to understand from you guys, where are the youngsters looking out for news from? I know that youngsters don't read the newspaper. There are not too many of us who read the newspaper. There are not too many of us who tune into the news channels. Where is your source of news? Where are you guys reading your news from? I mean, everybody wants to know, because I'm sure at home, your parents must be telling you, hey, you read the newspaper and all of that. But I have always noticed that people of your generation are very well, like, better informed than us, like, who might be reading newspaper. So what are you guys, like, what are the sources? Where are you guys, getting your news from? So let's start with you, Arjun. What are the apps? Where is it that you're reading your latest news from?
Actually, I used to keep up on news quite a bit, but then after a while it got so depressing to read the latest news, because every single, like, almost out of 5 articles, there's likely to be one murder, or one, an animal has been abused, or a woman has been raped, or a man has been killed. And I think that once again is an example of the sensationalism that we discussed previously. So at a point, I sort of uninstalled my news apps, because I felt like rather than informing me of things that could be valuable to me, they seek to just gain my attention and keep my attention. But if I do want to check and read up on news, I mostly go to Twitter, and I see the verified tweets that's been tweeted about the topic, and then I like to read the comments of these tweets to know what are different people's opinions. So I think Twitter, there are a lot of fake news, like news spreading around on Twitter, but mostly when it comes from a verified source, I think it's mostly real. So on top of that, if I read the comments, I tend to get multiple perspectives easily as well. So I mostly use Twitter for news.
Ravi, what about you, Tejas and Anjali? What are you guys, using to get your daily dose of news?
So yeah, same as Arjun. I used to use Twitter a lot, and I did receive a lot of information there. I'm sure you know about the Black Lives Matter protest that happened in the US after George Floyd's death. So the media outlets in the US refused to cover a lot of the protests, and when they did cover it, they were heavily on the side of the police, who are actually who were the villains in that case, because police brutality was at the root of everything. So they did not show the accurate viewpoint that the protesters were in fact protesting in a peaceful manner. So it was on Twitter that people showed a real picture of what was happening. The protest happened for weeks, but the media only covered, like, say, the first 5 days, because that's when it was interesting to them. As soon as after the first 5 days, it kind of lost traction, but the protests were still going at full swing. So the media wasn't covering that. But on social media, you could really see a proper picture of what happens. And something else that I realized recently is that Tumblr, which is not commonly used anymore, but it's still an amazing app, especially if you want to look at prevalent situations relating to social injustice. So it has, and people of our generation, I know to a lot of adults we might seem like we are too young to know about serious issues, but we do care about them because this is the world that we're growing up in, right? So especially on Tumblr and Twitter, you get a lot of people who are in their teens or in their early 20s who have very interesting viewpoints, as Arjun said, on the news. So yes, I tend to go to Twitter or Tumblr for my news channel, and I found it works very well.
Lovely. And what about you, Tejas? Are you part of the Twitter brigade as well?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, Twitter is one social networking site out of all the apps that we have, which has a very serious side to it. Because we look at the others like Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat as very casual fora. But Twitter, it has a serious side to it. Like Twitter has all the verified profiles of our government agencies. Like all the three arms, they have their Twitter handles. And the main one that I follow is ANI. Because ANI is a government verified handle and is handled by the government, which gives legitimate and accurate and short news, which is quite interesting and informative at the same time. The second platform that I use is Instagram because Instagram has many handles which give out news on all aspects of the society, international news, news of every kind. And moreover, the comment section is more interesting because in the comment section, you get the opinions of so many people who are actually viewing that post. The third one is YouTube. There are a lot of YouTube channels which give out weekly updates or daily updates pertaining to different matters. Even we get weekly defense updates from YouTube as well, which are with and those updates cover topics which are not covered in the mainstream media. So I think these forms of these sources of information and news are quite intricate, analytical, and legitimate at the same time.
Perfect. So, as I see, we're running out of time. So, I'm going to take one last question. And this again, I will bring you back to the serious part of the conversation. That, all three of you come from an environment of school. So, what roles do you think schools play in inculcating integrity among students? Like Anjali said, that, you guys are part of this world where media plays such a big influence. So what role do you think, especially schools need to take to instill the right kind of integrity and also to instill the right kind of, filter, if I may so say, in your mind that, you're able to filter out that, okay, what part of this news is objective and what part of this news is actually, just the sensationalized or the dramatized version of it. So, if you can talk about a little bit, I mean, if there is something your school does particularly in this regard, or if there's something that you'd like your school to do particularly in this regard, what would it be? So, Anjali, let's start from you.
So I'd say my school is already doing pretty well in this particular regard. So I'm part of the edexcel syllabus at our school. So that is an international syllabus, right? So it focuses a lot on the kind of research that we carry out. It is not purely book based. In fact, I would say it is way more hands on. We interact with our environment. We are encouraged to go out and find our own answers to solutions. And, it's stereotypical, but we are encouraged to think out of the box. Yes. So when we have been doing that for several years, what happens is you learn to identify things on your own. And How do you learn this? The hard way. Obviously, everybody makes mistakes, but you keep trying, and as you keep trying, you will eventually learn to recognize what is good and what is not. So since they don't, guide us around all the time, instead they purely push us in the right direction and say, please go find out what is good for you. So when the schools do that, I think we as students, we go out, and it's almost like we're learning to be adults. We have to make our own way. We have to find out what works for us, what works for everybody. So I definitely think that because of that kind of hands-on learning that we are allowed to do, we are definitely at an advantage when it comes to having absolute integrity, especially when it comes to issues like this. So I'd say it's amazing.
Lovely. Arjun, what about you? You guys go to the same school. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
I actually do the IB diploma program, and almost every week I get bogged down with assignments, research assignments, in fact. And it's things like they give us contemporary topics, and then we have to research and write our own opinion on it. And whenever we research, we are forced to, it's mandatory to take sources which are verified, which can be verified. So I think that's an essential skill that I'm learning through my program here, because like I can simply Google, find a random website and take the information from that, but I'm forced to take verifiable sources, and that's something that's really helpful to me, that I know will be helpful to me when I grow up and go to college and stuff. And also, I think while this is really helpful to me, I feel like this should be a part of education from when I start my schooling, not just in my 11th and 12th. I feel like the ability to differentiate between fake news and real news is something that should be imparted in education from at least the middle schools. The problem is, in this age of disinformation where fake news is so prevalent, youngsters especially, need to know how to differentiate between fake news and real news, and need to have the natural skill to inquire and verify a topic or a news before accepting it to themselves. So I think while I am learning a lot right now, I feel like for the upcoming generations, this should be part of their primary education, their middle school education, rather than just in high school.
Absolutely. What do you think, Tejas, about this?
So when it comes to the discretion that students should have towards the news that we are receiving. So first of all, my school, we have newspapers for each and every grade. So and newspapers from reputed media houses, like we have from Times, we have from DNA. So and these are different from the actual newspapers that you can get while sitting at your home. So these newspapers are focused on students. So they give you news about what is happening. So I am in Jaipur. So in each and every newspaper, there is a segment which says what is happening in Jaipur, happening in and around Jaipur, Rajasthan, and what the students in Jaipur are doing. And it contains news which actually is interesting to students. It covers all the subjects. It covers the national matters. It covers the international matters. It has technology. It has sports. It has everything. So it gives a very broad view towards news and information. So all these newspapers are in circulation in my school, and during the COVID pandemic, obviously we can't receive them physically, but we are having PDFs circulating in all the class groups. So that is a good thing. Moreover, we have discussions and debates quite frequently in our school. So uh, that helps the students because they analyze, they form their own opinions. So I think that automatically instills in them the discretion of identifying what is actually substantive news and what is fake news or misleading news. So, and when it comes to integrity, we have a lot of activities which are group based, which are team based. So that enhances team effort, team work between the members of a team during that activity, and also gives rise to integrity in each and every student, that they have to perform, they have to put forward their viewpoints while respecting the other person's opinion, and while respecting the boundaries that they have, and while respecting the relation they share with their team members, and that uh, so they develop the integrity to perform well, but also in their boundaries and not overstep or disrespect the person they are competing against. And I think it gives rise to camaraderie, teamwork, and also integrity. So, uh, moreover, like if you look at it from broader point of view, my school is doing pretty well in that field. And I think that these qualities of having having discretion against for towards the news that we are receiving should be there in each and every student as well as the adults. So I think that's what I feel. That's what I feel. Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear all the amazing work that is being done by the teams at Jayashree Peribal High School as well as Manchester International School, and it's so heartening to hear that your schools are putting in so much of an effort and trying to make sure that they're giving you skills that take you far and beyond than just imparting knowledge to you in classroom. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. We've had some great insights from each of you on what you feel about, the role that independent journalistic media plays in the Indian democracy. And I'm pretty sure that each of our viewers who have joined here, if you see the comment section, there are some great comments that are coming in. I'm sure each of them have also thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And if not anything, we have achieved our purpose of giving them another perspective and multiple perspectives to think about. So thank you so much to each and every one of you for taking out the time. I know you guys have been, having multiple online classes and all of that. So I'm truly grateful to each and every one of you for taking out the time, being with us today, and sharing with us your very well-researched opinions on each of the questions. It was definitely so much of fun. And it was so great for me to hear and so refreshing to hear what the youth thinks about this particular issue. And I'd like to thank each of our audience members for joining us. It's really heartening to see when you guys come out in large numbers. It's great support and encouragement to us to run this segment on a weekly basis. And we'll be back again next week with a new bunch of students and with a new contemporary issue to talk about. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Farhan.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Thank you so much.